Hey everyone, and welcome. Today, we're going to dive into a topic that most of us think we know, but we're probably only seeing the tip of the iceberg. We're going to really rethink what we think disability is, and I promise you'll walk away with a much clearer picture. Let's get right into it.
So let me ask you something straight up. When I say the word disability, what's the very first image that pops into your head? Just take a second and think about it.
Yeah, for a lot of us, it's something visible, right? A wheelchair, a white cane, something external that tells us a person has a physical challenge. But here's the thing. That view, as common as it is just a tiny, tiny piece of the puzzle. The reality is so much bigger.
To really get the full picture, we've got to look at the official rule book, so to speak. In India, that's the Rights of Persons with Disabilities Act of 2016. And this act gives us a really powerful and frankly game-changing definition.
Okay, now this is where it gets really interesting. It's not just about a medical condition or an impairment. The absolute key phrase here is in interaction with barriers. That right there changes everything.
You can basically boil it all down to this simple formula. It's not just the impairment alone. It's the impairment plus the barriers in society that equals a disability. So, you see, it's not just about what's going on with a person's body or mind. It's about how society is built, or not built, to include them. It's a social thing, not just a medical one. Okay, so with that new way of thinking in our heads, let's break down how the Act actually classifies different disabilities. First up, we'll start with the one most people are probably familiar with, physical disabilities.
So under this big umbrella of physical, the Act lays out these four main types. Let's just quickly touch on what each of these means.
First, you've got locomotor disabilities. This is all about movement, a person's ability to move themselves or things around. And as you can see from the examples, this is a really broad category, covering everything from conditions like cerebral palsy to things that can happen later in life.
Next up, visual impairment. And this is a perfect example of how disability isn't black and white. It's not just about total blindness. The Act recognizes it's a spectrum, including all sorts of low vision that can really impact a person's life.
And it's pretty much the same idea for hearing impairment. It's the full range, from people who are hard of hearing and maybe use hearing aids, all the way to people who are deaf.
All right, let's shift gears. Now we're diving into a category that's often invisible, which can make it even harder for people to understand. We're talking about disabilities related to our intellectual function and our mental health. And the Act splits this into two key areas: intellectual disability and mental illness. So intellectual disabilities are really about how our brains process the world, things like reasoning, learning new skills, and adapting to social situations. And what's so important here is that the Act specifically includes things like dyslexia and autism spectrum disorder, a much more modern and inclusive way of looking at it. Now, for mental illness, the official definition really focuses on impact. It's about a disorder that gets in the way of a person's ability to just get through the day. Having this recognized legally is a huge, huge deal because it acknowledges just how disabling mental health conditions can be. Okay, on to our final big category. This one covers disabilities that come from long-term chronic health issues, conditions that can stick around for a long, long time and really change a person's life. And under this big heading, the law points to two main sources: chronic neurological conditions and different kinds of blood disorders. So you've got chronic neurological conditions. Think of these as diseases that affect the body's entire communication network, the nervous system. The Act calls out things like multiple sclerosis and Parkinson's, recognizing their serious long-term effects. And finally, certain chronic blood disorders are also legally seen as disabilities because of the massive impact they have. You know, something like hemophilia, which affects how your blood clots. You can imagine how that would impact pretty much everything in your daily life. All right, we've just walked through a whole bunch of categories and definitions. But so what? Why does all this legal stuff, this framework, actually matter in the real world? What does it do?
Well, it matters because it all leads to this really crucial concept called a benchmark disability. This is a legal standard, a specific line that gets drawn in the sand.
And that line is 40%. If an official authority certifies that a person's disability is at 40% or higher, they legally meet this benchmark. And this is the whole point. Hitting that 40% benchmark isn't just a label. It's literally the key that unlocks a whole system of legally required support. Things like benefits, help in school or at work, and other systems designed specifically to tear down those barriers we talked about.
So, we've seen how the law completely shifts our thinking, right? It's not about fixing a person, it's about fixing the barriers around them. And that leaves us with one last really powerful question, a question for all of us. Now that we understand the framework, what are we going to do to help tear those barriers down? What can we do to help build a more inclusive world?